Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala sayyidil anbiya wal mursaleen, wa ba'd. In continuation with our previous sessions on the laws pertaining to fasting in the month of Ramadan, just a quick recap of some of the issues that we covered so far. We spoke about the various types of fasting, the importance of intention, the three components of fasting, the things that will nullify my fast in terms of consumption, vomiting, intimacy. We spoke about the two types of penalties / making up. One is the qada, one is the kafara. Today, and hopefully the final lesson, our session, we will cover medical items that break your fast. And this is something that people oftentimes ask because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives illness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives cure. But in the month of Ramadan, it's a time where there are certain rules. So even if I'm ill and I have to take medicine, yes, that is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tried or tested me with, but the laws of Ramadan still remain pertaining to certain situations. A general principle about what breaks my fast, it's not only regarding medicine, it's in general, but this is more pertinent in regards to medical items. In order for my fast to break in terms of medical items, the following needs to happen. Number one, whatever medical item I take needs to be taken from the mouth past the throat. Again, I'm going to reiterate and emphasize and clarify each one of these points. Number one is either it goes through the mouth and passes the throat. Number one. Number two, it goes through the nostril and it passes the throat. Number three, a person has a perforated eardrum, meaning the eardrum is broken, and then it goes through the eardrum and it passes the throat. Number three. Number four, it enters through the back passage, the rectum. It enters through the back passage, the rectum. It's number four. Number five, it is administered directly into the abdomen, into the belly. So 5 situations. Situation number one, whatever medicine I take, whether it's in the form of tablets, whether it's in the form of a pump, whether it's in the form of an endoscopy, a surgery, regardless of how it is, theoretically speaking, there are 5 ways for my fast to break. Number one, it is placed into the mouth, but then it passes the throat. Remember this because I'm going to clarify this again. Number two, it passes through the nostrils and it goes past the throat. Number three, your eardrum, if the eardrum is perforated, it is broken, it passes through the eardrum and definitely it will go through the throat. Number four, it enters through the rectum, the rear passage. And number five, it is administered directly into the stomach. And inshallah, through some examples, this will become clear. So, let's say, for instance, the first issue I mentioned is that it goes into the mouth and then it passes the throat. It passes the throat. So there's a type of medicine that many people may be aware of, homeopathic medicine. Homeopathic medicine, what oftentimes happens is they have these small, really tiny, kind of like small balls or small little grains, you can say for a better understanding. You place it in the mouth, under the tongue, it doesn't pass the throat, it dissolves into the cavity of the mouth. So based on principle number one, will my fast break if I take this, put it into my mouth, under my tongue, it does not pass my throat, it dissolves into the cavities. Will my fast break or not? It will not break. Why? Because like I mentioned, it has to enter the mouth and pass the throat. In the case of homeopathic medicine, it goes into the mouth, but it does not pass the throat, it goes into the cavities of the mouth. Any medicine that does this, there are various types of medicine where it doesn't pass the throat, it gets absorbed into the different cavities of the mouth. That does not break your fast because it does not pass the throat. Alternatively, if I take a Tylenol, will my fast break? Yes, because it goes into the mouth and it passes the throat. Number 3, and I'm going to come back to this because this is a somewhat important discussion, but theoretically speaking, if I take an asthma pump, it goes into the mouth, does it pass the throat? Yes, I did not say it goes into the stomach, remember. It passes the throat, it enters the lung. Theoretically speaking, an asthma pump will break the fast. The reason I'm saying theoretically, because we're going to discuss later on, if time permits, what happens if it is a medical necessity, what do we do then? But in general, using an asthma pump, because it goes into the mouth and it passes the throat, the person's fast will break. Okay, number 2. Let's say, for instance, nasally, I inhale certain types of liquid for my chest or whatnot. Will my fast break? Yes, because when you take it, it's going to go through, it's difficult for it to not pass. So if let's say some liquids, and I inhale it, some really dense vapor, for instance. Remember, dense vapor, which I'll get back to later. If you inhale it, it goes into the lungs, it breaks your fast. But let's say, for instance, I take Vapor Rub, Vicks, and I apply a little bit of Vicks on my nose. Will my fast break? No. Why? Because although I put it in my nose, no substance went past my nose, past and into the throat. Does that make sense? I'll give you the difference. Let's say, for instance, if I smell Vapor Rub or Vicks, there's no actual density, there's no body that passes the nose. Yes, you're smelling, and there are very small, negligible particles. That will not break my fast. Alternatively, let's say, for instance, a lot of times when you have congestion, what you do is you take a bowl of really hot water, steaming water, and you put a bit of Vicks into that. Now, when you're inhaling the Vicks, including the steam. Will my fast break or not? Yes, my fast will break because now you have something with the body. What's the body over here? The vapors and the water that is passing my nose and passing the throat. Is that clear? Right? The difference between the two. Because when I smell Vapor Rub, Vicks, there's no density, there's no body. It's just the fragrance and very negligible particles. As opposed to actual steam, because now there's particles and vapors of water that come through. Is that clear? Number 3. If I have eardrops, I have some ear pain, and I take some eardrops, but my eardrum is perforated, it's broken. Does my fast break? Yes, my fast breaks. Alternatively, if my eardrum is not broken and I take it, will my fast break? No, it will not break because my eardrum is still intact. Okay, another situation. I have really sensitive eyes. I have very irritable eyes, and I take eye drops. Will my fast break? No, because anything that passes through the eyes is fine. It does not break your fast. Okay, number 4. Let's say, for instance, I go to the doctor and I need to take a colonoscopy, right? And they insert a lubricated tube in the person's rear. Will the person's fast break? Yes, because it's administered through the rear. Last but not least, if a person needs medicine that goes directly into the intestines, you'll have to ask a medical expert exactly how that works. Will that break the fast? Yes, that will break the fast. Now, a few quick questions maybe that we've understood the theoretical principled approach to this. Let's take a few more studies. Let's say, for instance, I take insulin and I apply insulin on my arm. Will my fast break? It will not break. Why will it not break? Because I'm taking insulin on my arm, not through my mouth past the throat, not through the nostrils past the throat, not in a perforated ear, not through the rectum, or directly into the abdomen. If a person does take the insulin, although medical experts will argue that even when you take it, it doesn't go into the intestines, it goes into the bloodstream. But in any case, if I take it in the arm, it will not break my fast because it did not enter a mu'tabar, regarded legal orifice or a legal point of entry. Is that clear? Let's say, for instance, for whatever reason, a person has a very bad habit of smoking. And instead of smoking, they take nicotine patches. Inshallah, hopefully we don't have that habit, but some people do have that habit. And if they do have that habit and they're trying to get out of it, and they use a nicotine patch and they put it on their arm, will their fast break or not? No, their fast will not break. Why? Because it's not taken through the particular areas. Is the concept clear right now? Where it needs to enter in order for it to break? Now, based on these principles, you can now go ahead and understand everything else. I go to the doctor and I want to get treatment. I want to get a whitening or I want to get a cleaning of the mouth. When will my fast break when I go to the dentist? Yes? If anything of the treatment passes the throat, if somehow I can manage it not passing the throat, it will not break. Is this advisable? Obviously not, because why? You're putting yourself into a situation where it can break. I'm not talking about what's ideal or not ideal, what will happen. Okay, another situation. A person goes to the doctor and has an endoscopy. Will an endoscopy, where you have a tube that passes through the throat, will that break your fast or not? Yes, because there's some liquid lubrication around that tube that is now inserted that will break your fast. So, like this, we have to look at different masail of fiqh, different masail. I'll end with this. If a sister or even a brother goes to a doctor and from the front passage, not the rear, from the front passage some medicine is inserted, right? For whatever reason, if there's a rash or if there's something happens and some medicine, some liquid is inserted into the front passage, the private part, will the fast break? No, it only breaks when it enters from the rear, not from the front. Again, there's a lot of discussion in terms of the underpinnings, the philosophy, the proofs, the rationale behind these principles, but just for our ease and our understanding, just remember this. I'm going to repeat it one last time just so that we can remember. Number one, it has to pass through the mouth, past the throat. Number two, past the nostrils, past the throat. Number three, past an perforated, broken eardrum, obviously it goes to the throat. Number four, through the rectum, the rear passage. And number five, directly into the stomach. Is that clear? Now, this is something which a lot of people ask that, look, myself or my son or my daughter, we all have an issue where we need to take the asthma pump. Where we need to take the asthma pump without which the fast is broken. According to the position I personally hold, my teachers, and the vast majority of scholars that I have spoken to, that is not a valid excuse. That if you need to take the asthma pump, that will break your fast. However, some scholars have given lenience, and if you are following an opinion that does give lenience, I will not criticize that opinion because I can somehow understand where that opinion comes from. But personally, I am not comfortable with it. If a person does take an asthma pump and that will break the fast, if they need to take it, then they should not fast because the fasting will break. Again, if you've spoken to a scholar or you know of a scholar who has given you a fatwa or a position that it doesn't break, then fabiha wa na'imat, that is that scholar's opinion. I will not criticize it. Is that clear? Okay, so these are some basic principles, inshallah. By applying it, any other situation that we can think of, hopefully can fall under these situations. Right? If you think about any other medical situation, for instance, some people, they have a need to, they go to sleep with a certain type of oxygen. They need oxygen pumped inside of them. But the thing is, oxygen isn't something that breaks your fast. So if I need an oxygen mask and I sleep with it during the day, my fast will not break because the oxygen is not something that breaks my fast. Alternatively, if something is administered, it will not break my fast. Let's take another situation. If I go to get blood taken out, a blood test, and somebody draws blood, will my fast break? No, it will not break. If I go for a surgery and they give me IV drips, will my anesthesia, will my fast break? No, because it's not put into the right directions. Hopefully I've given enough examples and enough theory to understand this. Yes? If it's the Vicks on its own, Vicks with water, because now it has density from the water, that will break your fast. Same thing with steam. Because when you inhale the steam, it will break your fast because there are water particles that are going inside. No, it won't, because remember, it's not about what it is that you're taking, it's about the point of entry. Even if it gives you energy, look, giving you energy, the ulama explain that it is inadvisable to use anything that will boost your energy. But in terms of what will legally break my fast, because it does not enter from these 5 points of entry, it will not break my fast. Nicotine patch, yeah. Sorry? Again, I want to reiterate this point that nourishment, stimulation, strength, all of these considerations will render it disliked and makruh, but it will not break the fast legally. In order for the fast to be broken legally, the scholars of fiqh have explicitly mentioned which points of entry it needs to enter in order for it to be regarded as something to break the fast. Is that clear? Any other questions? You can ask your questions right now since... I mentioned it earlier, the eye is not a point of entry that will break the fast. Yes. Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
My stomach sits right here.
Yeah.
And it's about 2.5 inches inside.
Yeah.
This is subcutaneous, that means it goes under the skin. Is it advisable during month?
It doesn't go into the intestine or any area. It goes directly into the skin.
It goes under the called subcutaneous.
Yeah.
It's a 1/4 inch. Your whole fat layer is about 2 inches.
Yeah.
It goes 1/4 inch.
If that is the case, it's not a problem. The idea is it needs to go into the intestine or the stomach, otherwise it's fine. So if it's raining and accidentally water comes inside, again, if it's like a small drop, it's not a problem, but if a substantial amount of water goes in your mouth and you swallow it, yes, the fasting will break. But generally when it's raining, that small amount that comes inside, it usually becomes nothing inside of the mouth. Remember, it has to be enough that you swallow as well. So because the example of that is if my mouth becomes moist by gargling, it doesn't break my fast. It needs to be enough that I've drank that amount, right? So if I'm walking and my mouth is open and water keeps coming inside and I swallow it, then yes, it will break my fast. But if a drop or two goes in my mouth, but it's like a negligible amount, it doesn't break my fast. Yes. The ulama explain that in terms of fasting, making intention just in the beginning of the month for the rest of the month is not sufficient. You need to make intention every single night for the next day's fast. However, making intention is not as complicated as people assume, because just the mere understanding that I'm going to fast the following day is sufficient. You don't need to, even from the beginning, you don't verbally need to say, nawaitu an asuma shahr. You don't, all you need to do is say, I have, mentally, you just need to even think about it before you sleep that I'm fasting tomorrow, khalas. Your intention is done. Okay, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we spoke about vomiting last week. There's only 2 situations where vomiting will break your fast. Situation number 1, I intentionally induce an entire mouthful. Number 2, I vomit mouthful and I swallow it back. Only these 2. In the situation that you mentioned, it came out unintentionally because of my illness. It doesn't break my fast. Okay. We have a few more slides that are discussions that we need to have, inshallah. If there are more questions in the ending, please feel free to ask then. Okay, then we have people, these are people who have medical exemptions. Then we have what we call ma'dhur, people who have excuses because of which they are not required to fast. These are roughly 6 people. Number 1, the person who is sick. Number 2, the person who is traveling. Number 3, pregnant and breastfeeding mothers. Number 4, the menstruating sister. Number 5, the postnatal bleeding as well. And number 6, insanity. Okay, I'm going to go through some of the quick ones because we're aware of it. In terms of menstruation, Our mothers and sisters, they go through that monthly cycle. In the state of that monthly cycle, the fasting will not be valid. Hence, even if they began the fast, and there's just a few moments left and that monthly cycle begins, that particular fast is now rendered null and void. They will have to repeat that fast. They will repeat that fast at another date, obviously once Ramadan comes to an end. The second is obviously postnatal bleeding. Mother just gave birth, and now for roughly 40 days, give or take, she goes through that phase. There's no need to fast at that time either. They will just repeat those fasts at a later date. And number 6 is a person who has a very severe mental disorder because of which he is unable to even understand things, let alone fast. That person should not be forced not to eat and food taken away from that person. Remember, the definition of insanity is a bit intricate, but for the most part, it's a person who's not in control of their mental faculties, cannot distinguish things, cannot understand things. That person is overlooked. The more common questions people have are the sick person, the traveler, and the pregnant and breastfeeding mother. For the pregnant and breastfeeding mother, this is a very tricky situation because oftentimes it's a judgment call. Just because a mother is breastfeeding or someone is pregnant, by itself is not an excuse unless that mother has medical advice that there's going to be harm to you or the child. There is medical advice that there is going to be harm to the child or yourself. In that case, they do not need to fast. But the scholars explain that when this issue, the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding mother, it's better to take into considerations one's health than try to err the other way. Meaning that I've spoken to a doctor, the doctor is about 50-50, I myself, I'm about 50, like the mother is about 50-50, do I breastfeed, do I not breastfeed? Remember, the Sharia has given this concession that if you have some doubt that there will be harm to you or your child, then you are allowed to make up the fast later. Yes, if, for instance, the mother has experience and says, look, I've done it in the past, I know that it's not going to harm me, there's nothing wrong with it. But if it's a new mother or it's a new pregnancy and they're not sure how to react to it, the doctors are advising against it, they are excused, they do not need to fast, they simply need to make it up later on when they are able to do so. The other one is the person who is traveling. Now, the person who is traveling, again, I'm going to mention my own opinion and the opinion of my teachers because that's what I've learned. In order for you to be excused when you are traveling, you need to commence your travel before the fasting begins. Let me repeat that. My opinion, the opinion of my teachers, the opinion that I have learned and studied is when a person is traveling, you do not need to fast. But the condition is your travel needs to begin before you begin the fast. So for instance, let's say for instance, Fajr time comes in at 5 o'clock. I have a flight at, let's say, 8 or 9 o'clock. I cannot say I will be excused from fasting because my travel starts at 8 o'clock. No, I need to commence my travel before that time in order for my fast to be accepted. Let's say for instance, I'm driving to Houston and I'm leaving at 3 o'clock in the morning. By leaving 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm leaving before the time of Fajr, hence I am a traveler, I do not need to fast. Again, if you've heard a different opinion, you've spoken to another scholar, I will not intrude on that opinion. That is between yourself and that scholar. That is the position of the traveler. There's a lot of other issues relating to traveling in terms of, okay, let's say I'm flying, when do I break my fast? How much do I calculate the time? There's a lot of issues here. And I know there's going to be a lot of follow-up questions, but the principle is, in terms of where you break your fast, you always take into consideration sunset at the current location you are in. You take into consideration sunset at the current location you are flying over. So let's say, for instance, I begin my fast at 4 o'clock in Dallas. 5 o'clock in Dallas. I have a flight at, let's say, 9, 10 o'clock before Dhuhr in the morning. And because of the flight, I fly over a place where by 3 o'clock in Dallas time, 3 o'clock in Dallas time, but the location that I'm flying over is already sunset, I am allowed to break my fast because the point that I take into consideration is where? The place that I am currently flying over. Is that clear? There, yeah, I'm about to get to that one right now. The other situation is, let's say for instance, it's continuously increasing to the point now that it's been more than 24 hours and I haven't witnessed a sunset yet. What is the mas'ala? Two things. So let's say for instance, I began my fasting at 5 o'clock, Fajr time, I begin. And then later on in the day, like around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I take a flight. And I'm continuously flying to the point that it's already sunset where I began. It's already sunset, but I'm passing places and I still haven't seen or passed a location of sunset. What do I do? The ulama explain that in the moment you pass over a place of sunset, so long as it is less than 24 hours, so long as it less than 24 hours, you have to continuously fast until you reach a 24-hour point. The moment you reach a 24-hour point and you still do not witness a sunset, you are now allowed to just break your fast normally. However, if the 24-hour period becomes too long and too difficult, meaning it's becoming difficult for you, then you are allowed to break your fast in between. Difficult as in like it will medically be harmful. If it's discomfort, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, there's a lot of secondary issues, follow-up questions. I'm just mentioning this very theoretically because that's all that time and the discussion permits. In terms of a traveler, just remember it would have to begin before the fast actually commences. When you are flying over a location, you take into consideration that current location. And last but not least, if you don't witness an actual sunset, theoretically speaking, you have to wait for at least 24 hours before you break your fast. However, if that 24 hours, because I'm a diabetic or I'm sick, I can't do it, it's starting to affect me medically, then I can break my fast because of a medical excuse, that is fine. Okay, last but not least, in terms of the people who are excused, is the sick person. Oftentimes, there are people who have illnesses that do not permit. Let's say, for instance, I need to take medication, I'm very weak, or I have very severe form of acid reflux because of which I'm in a lot of discomfort. What's the ruling over here? If fasting will cause intense difficulty, remember, one is discomfort and one is pain and difficulty. Discomfort is not a sufficient cause. So let's say, for instance, if I do not, let's say I have this thing where I need to take my multivitamins every day. If I don't, I feel slightly weak. That is not a sufficient reason to now, break your fast. However, if I have a medical excuse, the doctor is saying, look, fasting for you is going to be harmful. In that case, I have an excuse not to fast when I am sick. Now, what does it mean to be sick? Every situation is very different. Every circumstance is different. The principle here is you need to have medical advice from preferably a Muslim doctor who kind of understands the needs and demands of fasting and is also medically trained as well. Obviously, he or she is a doctor and can advise that, look, fasting and your medical situation do not go hand in hand. You should not fast. What happens if a person is now sick? Let's say, for instance, I have this severe acid reflux that if I do not eat every few hours or if I do not take medication, my stomach will bloat and I'll have very intense pain. Remember, not just minor discomfort, intense pain. Then I am allowed to not fast at all. Like, I do not have to fast. Yes, if I want, I can, emulate those who are fasting to the best of my ability and eat during my opportunities. That's there, but I am excused from fasting. But the question is, what do I do now? If I did not fast because of some illness, I will have to repeat those fasts again at a later date. But if my illness persists and I do not recover, then what do? I don't ever recover. How am I supposed to make it up? I have to give fidya. I have to give fidya. What is fidya? Fidya basically means I have to give the sadaqatul fitr amount for every single day that I missed. So this happens a lot. Let's say, for instance, my mother, my father, my grandparents, they're very ill. They're not able to fast because of some medical issue. They will not fast for 30 days. So that means for those 30 days, they or myself or anybody, we have to give fidya, which is roughly, I'm giving a rough estimation, about $6, the sadaqatul fitr amount for each fast. Roughly $6 for each fast needs to be given. Okay, so let's say, for instance, I'm sick. And the doctor says for these 10 days, you need to take medication. It's very harmful for you to fast. So for those 10 days, I do not fast. Once the month of Ramadan is done, because I fasted 20 more days, I can make up those fasts. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm cured. I need to fast. But let's say I have a terminal illness because of which I am not able to fast, because of some very serious diabetes or some very serious issues, I cannot fast. Then since I can never make them up again, I need to pay, in our example, hypothetically speaking, a rough estimation of $6 for every single day. Let's say it's 29 or 30 days. You do the math, you multiply it, you give it. Where do you give it? Who do you give it to? You give it to poor people. Ideally, you give it in your own location. But if there is an external factor because of which you want to go and give it back home, there's nothing wrong with that. Is that clear? The necessity of fasting is maturity. The moment they reach puberty, it is now necessary for them to fast. If they have not reached puberty, they do not need to fast. If they have reached puberty, they need to fast. Now, the age of puberty obviously differs from person to person because it's when you have ihtilam or you reach a stage of physically capable of ejaculation or a wet dream or whatnot. You go through those bodily differences. You go through puberty. Then only will fasting become necessary. Okay, this is the last situation about medicine that I wanted to repeat is, let's say for instance, I am very sick and I was under the assumption that I will never recover and I missed 30 days. What do? You give sadaqatul, I will never recover. That's my assumption. I can't make it up later. I have to pay every single day fidya for each day that I missed. But now I paid the fidya, and with the idhn and tawfiq of Allah, I am now cured. Even though I paid, if I get cured, I have to make up those fasts. If I was under the assumption that I will not get cured, and I paid that fidya, and then now I miraculously, with the tawfiq of Allah, I get cured, I now have to make up those fasts. Yeah, even if it takes 6-7 years, if you fully recover, then you have to make up the fast of those days that you missed. Remember, sorry? Yes, if you've fully recovered. Again, you do it within your capacity. That means now you have fully recovered, and then you have to make it up. Sorry, is somebody, yes? No, it will not. Sorry? Again, getting energy is makruh. It's disliked. It will not break your fast, but the more energy you're getting, the more rewards are being taken away. Kind of like that. Sorry, yes, somebody has a question? Yes. So like I explained in the beginning, if I'm making wudu, and I remember that I'm fasting, and I accidentally swallow a whole mouthful of water, my fasting will break. Or even when I'm gargling and it goes through, it will break my fast. If I forgot that I was fasting, remember, I explained in the beginning the difference between a mistake and forgetfulness. One is, I forgot that I'm fasting, and I'm busy, I'm like, wait, why am I thirsty? I don't know. And I start gargling, I start drinking the water. I forgot that I'm fasting, there's not a problem. But if I remember that I'm fasting, and as I'm gargling, I accidentally drink it, my fast will break. So the difference is whether I remember I'm fasting or not. Okay, just to conclude, inshallah, the last point are, what are certain things that are disliked? What I mentioned, anything that will increase your energy, right? Doesn't break your fast, that will break your fast. Unnecessarily tasting food. Tasting food, like I mentioned, if there's a need for it, it will not break your fast. But if it is unnecessary, it will not break your fast. And there are other things, obviously, backbiting and doing, those get rid of the rewards of fasting. Yeah, there are, yeah, I guess, khair, I think hopefully we've covered most of the discussions. Inshallah, with that, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward us and make this fasting in the month of Ramadan a source of reward. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to apply the knowledge that we have received in the month of Ramadan. If there are any questions, feel absolutely free to ask. Yes? Yeah. You take into consideration the fidya amount for wherever you are. You don't look at where you're giving it, where you are. Because ideally you have to give it locally, right? So it's where you are, and then if you're giving it overseas, however you. Yeah, you give the equivalent, but you take into consideration your. Listen, I just gave a rough estimate. Right now in New York, I'm saying in New York because I just received the fatwa from some of the ulama. They went and they weighed it. There's different amounts. The bare minimum is $6. Even if a person's unable to do, if you don't even have that much money to do it, you put in your wasiyah, or even if you don't have it, you make istighfar and Allah will forgive you. After that, you have nothing else in your capacity. Yes?
In case the person going from Medina, example,
Yeah.
the fasting is going to open in 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
You a lot of time they rush you and take the plane, and you're going toward the Jeddah.
Yeah.
When you're going toward Jeddah, you're going toward the sun.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you open the fasting. In that case, you have to open or not.
So I'm leaving Medina right before Maghrib time. Right before Maghrib, you're saying? Before Maghrib, right? So obviously I'm still on the plane, but you don't witness sunset. Is that what you're saying?
The sun, I can see the sun.
And it hasn't set yet. Then you can't break your fast. You have to wait for the.
They force you to open it.
Well, obviously that's their understanding of it. You're gonna have. I mean, nobody can. Yeah, you don't open it. Yeah. Again, like I said, in these issues there may be differences of opinion. Whatever opinion they follow, inshallah, they can follow it. I personally say you wait till the actual sunset and then you break it.
They say when you open the timing, same timing you can open in the plane. You don't see, they don't worry about.
No, you take that into consideration. Yeah.
You cannot open.
Yeah. Ideally, yes. Yes.
Suppose the fasting starts at, let's say, 5 o'clock, you have to leave like 3 o'clock, or you just decide, can I just go ahead and pray and do everything and just keep fasting?
If you want to fast, even though you're traveling, if it is harmful for you, you shouldn't fast. But if you have the strength to do it, it's permissible. Yes. So the kafara amount is different from the fidya amount. The fidya amount, you just have to feed one poor person a meal. Yeah, so the sadaq, no, one person per fast. Kafara is where I have to feed one person for 60 days, 2 meals, or 60 people, 2 meals. That's the difference. Kafara is different from the fidya. Well, it's a sadaqatul fitr amount, whatever that is. That's about $6. Yeah, zakatul fitr, whatever the zakatul fitr amount is. I mean, they just say you have to give 1 sa', whatever that is. That's, yeah, like whatever you're paying for sadaqatul fitr, that's the amount. It makes it more easier. Don't worry about how many meals you have to give, because generally you can give them 1 meal. If you literally give 1 meal per thing, that's fine. But generally they look at the fidya amount. I actually go and I give the equivalent amount. Because for the breaking of the fast, you have to give a fidya. For the kafara, you have to feed. They're 2 different things. One is to give an amount, and one is to feed. Kafara is different from the fidya amount. Yeah. So in any case, from zakat to udhiyah to sadaqatul fitr, all of these things, ideally everything is done locally. Because a person's own community should benefit from their financial charities. But if you have a reason to give it overseas, for instance, you trust the process overseas, or you have family that need it, that case, it's fine to give it overseas. But remember, you always take into consideration your local amount. Even if I'm going to pay over there, I look at the value for me. Sadaqatul fitr for me is $6. If I want, I'll give it over there, I'll give it here, but I look at my own circumstance. So a good example is, let's say Sadaqatul fitr over there is the equivalent of $2, but over here it's the equivalent of $6. I will go with my local $6 wherever I'm going to pay, but it's my responsibility. Yes? He's not going to recover. Yeah, but the issue is he able to fast? Well, again, from the Sharia perspective, if he has no medical justification, then that is qada. You can't pay unless you have a medical justification. If the doctors say, look, there's no reason for you not to fast, then that person cannot now say, I'm going to pay. Fidya is only in the circumstance where I am too weak or too sick to fast, and I'm too sick to make it up. Then I only go for fidya. It's not an exit plan for when I feel uncomfortable and not ready to fast. Yeah. So toothpaste, again, as long as nothing passes the throat, it's fine. But ideally use a very small amount. As long as nothing passes the throat, your fast is fine when you're using toothpaste. But because of the fact that it's playing around, they say it's ideal you do not do it. But let's say my breath is really bad and I'm about to go to work and I realize that I haven't brushed my teeth, then yes, you're allowed to brush it, but try to make sure that nothing passes the throat. Anyways, inshallah, if there are any questions on Ramadan, we still have a few more days. You can meet me in person and inshallah ask. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for anything that we've said wrong. Anything that we said right is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything wrong is from myself and shaitan. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullahu khairan, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.